Greetings, I'm Ed Wagner with Barnello Winery in Tualatin, Oregon, which is part of the Willamette Valley AVA. And today we're doing a video in a continuing series of vine to wine. And our previous video, we talked about veraison, where we're seeing our grapes make their first turn in color or softness, which is indication that the sugar content is starting to build in the grapes. And the last video we did was the third week in August. And today we're going to be talking about how do you make the decision that's one of the hardest decisions during the season, and that is when to harvest. Today's September 20th, 2020. We've had a terrible previous week where we had a lot of fires in the area, a lot of smoke, and that's a consideration. There's so many things that can go wrong when you lead right up to the time to harvest. The birds love the grapes when they're at the ripest level, so you can always almost tell when it's harvest time when the grapes, when the birds show up, the bees show up, and the ants show up. Fortunately, we don't have any deer or rabbits, so we're in pretty good shape there. So what we're going to do today is there's two ways of testing the sugar content in your grapes. One is in the vineyard through an instrument called a refractometer. And that gives you a pretty good indication what our Brix levels is, which is actually the percentage of sugar content in your grapes. But the more accurate way of determining what the real sugar content or the Brix level is once you harvest the grapes and you crush them and you get a good juice sample and you use what's called a hydrometer, and that gives you really a true indication as to what the average is going to be of your harvest and the Brix levels. So we're going to start in a minute, and we're going to do some refractometer testing. I'm going to get a kind of an average, and then we're going to break and go over to where we do the juice testing and the hydrometer, and that's going to tell us today pretty much where our Brix levels are going to be when we're done harvesting for the day. All right, that's it for the moment. Next up, the refractometer test. Okay, we're back. Once again, I'm Ed Wagner with Barnello Winery in Oregon. And we're going to use a refractometer now, which is the instrument used by most vineyard personnel to get a good sense as to what the Brix levels are on their grapes. So we're just going to pick a grape here. And what we do is we squeeze a little of the juice on the lens. I always like to taste it and see how well we're doing. Nice and sweet. We close the lid, and there's a graduated vertical scale in here from 0 to 30. When you hold the eyepiece up to the sky, you get a reading, and it tells you, basically where you're at. In this particular grape, it's at about 21.5 Brix. Now, we're on the less sun side of the vineyard right now. So I want to also take a measurement on the sunny side of the vineyard. We get a little bit more sun during the day on this side because of the way the vineyard was planted. Theoretically, the vineyard should be planted north to south. Because of the layout of my property, it worked out a little bit better for me this way. So we're going to take another grape from this side, give it a little shot. Still nice and sweet. And this one's up at 24. And that doesn't surprise me because on this end of the vineyard, our Brix levels are a little bit higher. We've got a little bit of a slope downhill, as you can see. And down at that end of the vineyard, most of our measurements are more like 19 to 20. So this morning, I did 20 clusters with the refractometer. I clipped each cluster and I crushed those 20 clusters, and we're going to go over to where we did our bench studies for our hydrometer and see where we really ended up. One last point I've noticed really over the last 5 years is that typically no matter what our refractometer measurements are, it always seems like the hydrometer levels are about 1 Brix less than the average of in the field. So we're going to go do a test. I'll give you all that data I did this morning. We are harvesting this morning. We are currently doing our Chardonnay, and as soon as the Chardonnay is done, we'll do a crush and we'll set the press for later today. And then we're going to finish up on our Pinot Noir 777. We'll do a crush, and then we'll be done for the day. So let's head on over to where we did our bench trial, and I'll show you what we ended up on testing with our hydrometer.